What is up, everybody? It is Jake back with Master Football. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to be updated on all things college football, hit that red subscribe button. Do it. Hit the like button as well, and follow me on Twitter/X. That fam is growing. And if you like EA college football content, go check out the MF Film Room. It is linked in my description here. But enough about all that. Time for college football content. Let's go. All right, guys, I've been a little light on the content here. Remember here, I'm building up the MF Film Room. It's growing pretty quick there. However, I was able to meet just yesterday with my boy Bronco Blameyer to discuss Boise State's spring game. What we're going to do here, we're going to link both his view from the spring game as well as mine. Both of those videos are going to be linked in the description as well. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the game. We're going to talk about kind of how our impressions. It's a spring game, so again, you can tell some things, not everything. But again, I ask him lots of questions here and there. Here is my interview with Bronco Blameyer. Please go follow him, subscribe to his channel too. And again, everything like that, we appreciate that. But without further ado, let's get into my interview with Bronco Blameyer on the 2024 Boise State spring game. All right, everybody, here it is after the spring game that we had recorded. I actually recorded on this here phone right here. I've got my man here, Bronco Blameyer, my boy Jake here, ready to go. Jake, we have a lot to discuss. But first of all, dude, the spring game, it was great to watch, man.
That was an exciting spring game because we had so many questions coming into that spring game. Probably more questions coming into spring game than we've ever had before. You know, you've got questions like, do we have a defense? Do we have a quarterback? We know that Ashton Jeanty is going to be our number one guy, but who's backing him up? It's been the 1-2 punch with Lonnie and Jeanty, so far. But who's going to be that number two guy? You got Dirk Cutter back in town. How's the offense going to look? Spencer Danielson fully at the helm now. No more interim stats. There were so many questions, and it all comes on top of probably the most anticipated Boise State football season in perhaps school history. You're because we've lived through the Kellen Moore era. Kellen Moore era was great, but before the Kellen Moore era happened, you didn't know it was coming. The 2007 season happened. Taylor Tharp at the helm goes 10-3, still a good year. They lose at the Hawaii Bowl. It's pretty good. And then, coming into the 2008 season, there wasn't that hype, and it exploded into the golden era. Well, we've been through the 2008 through 2011 season. We've seen what can happen. And now we see that we might potentially be on the cusp. So it's like we're back in the 2008 season, but we know what might be coming. And the anticipation right now in Boise is higher than I have ever seen it before. So when you talk about a spring game that had a lot of pressure on it, a lot of things that people were trying to find out, trying to learn, I've never seen a spring game that was so anticipated at Boise State. It was a great one to watch.
Dude, you got to give me a helmet, man. You just hyped me up with that, dude. You get this for free, baby. All right, so here we go. We're itinerary here. What we're going to do here, I have 3 sections here. First one we're going to go over is narratives. Second one, we're going to go over position group grades. And then the last one, we're going to have the questions that he has. So, Jake, really quickly here, I gave you this beforehand. Your 3 narrative storylines you pulled from the spring game. Do me a favor. Do 1, 2, 3 back to back to back. Just say them, and then we'll break them all down. So what are your 3 big narratives to draw from the 2024 Boise State spring football game?
Okay, so it's 3.5 narratives, if that's okay. 3.5 narratives. So number 1, Malachi Nelson is ahead of schedule. Number 1, Malachi Nelson's ahead of schedule. Second, defense won the spring game. I think that is a huge narrative that we need to talk about. 3, keep an eye on Sire Gaines. And then combined with that, Dirk Cutter is cooking. And that is that's the 3.5. That's the 4 narratives right there. I mean, you go through those, and it was a heck of a spring game to watch. And pulling out those narratives, I think that you learn a lot about what might be happening this season. We can go through them.
Yeah, and absolutely those. So your first 2 were literally my first 2. Absolutely. So first one, just to make sure we're clear about this. And again, for people who don't understand, Boise State is not necessarily a place that pulls in a 5-star here, 4 stars in a season, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. So when we get word, because remember here, for Boise State, early on in the transfer portal window, it was like, is Spencer Danielson doing anything? Well, little did we know that your boy was cooking up, and he got ESPN's number 1, not number 1 player in the state of California, not number 1 in a certain school. He got the number 1 player in the country, ESPN's top player in the country. Malachi Nelson went to USC, comes over, and from what we could tell, you could tell he was the former number 1 player in the country. Continue on, man.
Yeah, Malachi Nelson had so much hype and expectations coming into this spring game. And we were kind of hearing the bits and pieces. We were seeing the little shadow highlights coming out of spring game on like Bronco Nation News or people posting on Twitter that were being able to attend. And he was looking good. But the questions were, he's still a freshman quarterback, right? He went through USC. Right? He was dealing with an injury. He played in a couple of games. He didn't have any real in-game experience. They played in their spring game. That was pretty much it. So as far as experience-wise, this is still a high school type quarterback. Where is he at? Well, coming into this spring game, through the spring practice, then actually coming and playing in the spring game, he looked like he was ready to start. I mean, Malachi Nelson is not the guaranteed starter yet. That decision has not been made. There is still going to be a battle in fall camp. Maddox Matson, the mini muscles that came out last year and was able to do some really, really good things in some crunch time situations, he has earned the chance to compete for this role, and he's going to be given a shot. And he could potentially win that role. But Malachi Nelson is going to be very, very tough to catch in fall. The ball placement in the spring game was nearly perfect. If anything, it was more of a disconnect with the wide receivers not being ready for it every time than it was Malachi Nelson. There were a couple balls here and there. Like there was one deep pass to Prince Strawn on the left side of the field, about a 50, or if he had caught it, it would have been a 50-yard touchdown. And I have watched through that replay about 30 times. And as far as I can tell, that ball placement is perfect. It is outside shoulder. It is slightly in front, on the sideline, and I think that Prince Strawn just missed it. He just couldn't find the ball and just didn't end up catching it. So right now you've got so many young, high potential wide receivers on this roster that don't have a ton of experience, and none of them have experience with Malachi Nelson, but he has an entire offseason to build that. Once you combine the pinpoint accuracy that Malachi Nelson is throwing, I mean, he is throwing deep 30-yard passes to the sidelines in good coverage, where the defender is in the right place, and it is just the only point that the wide receiver can get it. If you can combine that pinpoint accuracy with chemistry from this wide receiver unit, this could be one of the best combinations of wide receivers and quarterbacks we've ever seen at Boise State.
Absolutely. And to go off of what you said too there, because you're just like me, your number one feeds into your number two and vice versa, because if you really look at it, we'll give a sneak preview into number two here, but we'll get back to number one. In terms of nobody got loose. Every single receiver was accounted for at all times. Ones, twos, threes, fours. That defense was tight. Everybody knows. And we don't have to have the PTSD of watching Boise State's pass defense week 1 through 6 last year. Michael Penix is still throwing touchdowns against us if we would have kept on playing that game. That was, well, first of all, that team had 3 first-round picks on it, so let's just make sure we're clear about that. But again, with the first 6 weeks of the season, are we the worst defense? Are we the worst pass defense in the country? And complete turnaround. We saw that. But with the arm talent, and I'm going to make sure I go into the breakdown of arm talent versus arm strength, because there is a discrepancy there in terms of the ability to throw people open. Because again, all of those, every single throw that he had that was great, they were all contested, but he just has this ability to put the ball there, give his guy a chance. Oh, that was in double coverage, that touchdown to Chase Penry. Yeah, but both guys were trailing and had their backs turned to the football. Like, he knows what he's doing. He knows how to throw people open. And again, maybe not necessarily. I think it's one of those things where quarterbacks almost have different pitches. So again, Josh Allen's big thing coming out of Wyoming was he had one pitch. It was a fastball, deep ball, fastball, 3-yard check down, fastball right in his face. You don't do that when you get to the higher levels. Malachi Nelson, the arc ball, the two, the in between, the rocket, the little in route to Prince Strawn. He can throw all those different angles off balance. He really was impressive.
And when you talk about that, you talk about the types of balls and the accuracy with the throws. He's not just getting lucky. He's not just putting the ball out there and the wide receiver's making a great catch. Don't get me wrong. Wide receivers made great catches. You had Latrell Caples making almost a one-handed grab on the sideline. You had Prince Strawn, then the next play making a similar catch on the sideline. Then, of course, Chase Penry through double coverage. But every single one of those throws was exactly where it needed to be. That was 100% intentional. And what really impressed me about the Chase Penry touchdown was that play itself was not an easy throw to make. Even if he'd been wide open, it is not an easy throw to make, because he fakes the handoff and then he rolls left. So he's bootlegging left, and then he plants and has to come back and throw left to right across the field after rolling with all of his momentum going to the left side. So that was a tough throw to make in the first place. And then it is double covered, but he put that ball really in the only place where his guy could go up and get it. He put it high and outside. It was almost in the back right corner of the end zone. And Chase Penry came back and was able to track it. Even if the DBs turn around, even if they have their eyes back, they're not going to get there. They're not going to get through Chase Penry to go get that pass. Every single one of his throws was beyond the level that you would ever expect a freshman, and beyond the level that I've ever seen any quarterback throw a ball in a spring game. And honestly, it has been a long time since I've seen a quarterback throw pinpoint balls like this at Boise State. The last time I saw a quarterback who had this kind of consistent accuracy. We've had great quarterbacks here at Boise State. We've been a QBU of Mountain West. We've had great quarterbacks. They've all had their different strengths. But the last time that I saw a quarterback with this kind of finesse, with this kind of consistent pinpoint accuracy, and this kind of knowledge to outthrow the defender, like he's almost playing it in a 3D look angle, and he knows exactly what the defender is, was Kellen Moore. I mean, some of this ball placement, some of this touch, really, really reminded me of the GOAT.
Absolutely, man. Well, speaking of that ball placement and how the fact that he had to put it in to such tight windows there, let's go into your point number 2. First, and then for anybody out there who doesn't know, okay, Washington gave up yards, okay? Memphis gave up yards. We don't even have to mention the Colorado State game. Gave up yards. Just an absolute sieve of a defense, at least the first 6-7 games of the season last season. This last time, I counted it and looked through it. There might have been one guy, and I want to say it was when Colt Fulton was on the field, like way late in the fourth quarter. One guy got loose. Every single receiver was constantly accounted for. The pass defense, Gabe Hunter picking off, CJ Tiller. The pass defense was fantastic. Talk about that.
Yeah, Boise State, they completed 223 yards of passing, but most of that came on one or two drives with Nelson out there. Boise State, when you talk about their defense, to quarterbacks that weren't Nelson out there, was incredible. They looked really, really good. It was only when Nelson was out there that they started to get exposed. And again, they were right on there every single time. And that is so huge that defensively, the Boise State defense won this spring ball, because this offense is not just some run-of-the-mill offense, okay? Yes, I understand that you didn't necessarily have all of your top players out there. Ashton Jeanty wasn't, burning up the field on every single play. It wasn't the full Boise State offense that you're going to see. They had some injuries here and there they were dealing with. They had some, I think that Tyler Crow, he wasn't out there for the backup, so he might have had some experience in this game. So there were some guys that weren't playing. But overall, this Boise State offense, top to bottom, has depth, and it is very, very strong. This is a good offense. So we didn't really have a ton of questions for the offense outside of who's going to be the quarterback for them. The defense has been highly criticized, and deservedly so, for what happened last year. But the Boise State defense, top to bottom, defensive line, linebackers, and the secondary, played exceptionally in this game. You had, like you said, you had Gabe Hunter picking off CJ Tiller there on the first drive. You had the run game. Nobody got loose. Remember last year's spring game when Ashton Jeanty was just all over the field? He had like
5 touches for 150
run.
yards.
Yeah, he had like a 60-yard run, and then he had like a screen pass that turned into like another 60-yard run. It wasn't just him. I mean, you had, I think you had Dubar had some long runs as well. There was one really good run from Sire Gaines.
Yep.
But other than that, the Boise State offense only rushed for 91 yards. 91 yards on 28 rushing attempts. They only averaged 3.2 yards per carry. So Boise State's defense has improved so much. I'm not saying that they're great. I'm not saying that this is going to be the best defense in the Mountain West. But it has been at least, I believe, 2 spring games since the Boise State defense won a spring game. And they did not win last year. Now, spring games, it's so tough to pull concrete lessons from spring games. Because, you don't have the full playbook you're playing against yourself. You don't have your full playing roster out there. But we learned last year from last year's Boise State spring game that we did not have a defense. And like we said, it's a spring game. But that Boise State defense didn't look too much different from that spring game to when it translated onto the field. This Boise State defense, and they didn't have all their guys. I mean, they were missing Ahmad Hassani, Mario Nadarani, Shady Oladipo, Michael Callahan, then Max Steege and Tyler Weegis, some guys that were expected to maybe contribute as a backup role. None of those guys were playing. So this was a Boise State defense that was without a lot of their top players. I mean, that's three of your best guys right
Mm-hmm.
there, especially Ahmad Hassanin and Shea Oladipo. That's two of your top players on this defense, two of your top tacklers. And the Boise State's defense still stepped up in this spring game. So what I think we learned from the spring game, and it's something that J.L. Skinner said when he came on and he previewed the Boise State defense. He said they were inexperienced last year. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
we saw a Boise State defense that lost a majority of their top tacklers. I mean, it wasn't just J.L. Skinner.
Oh, yeah.
You also had Tyreek Jones,
Jones,
and Taylor Hillers, LaBeouf. I mean, you lost pretty much everybody across the board from that Boise State defense. This Boise State defense is now coming into experience. They have built depth in the recruiting portal, and they have now had a full year to gel and to find out what their strengths and weaknesses are. And you're going to see a much, much different product on the field this fall.
Actually, as a matter of fact, my roommate was telling me, he was like, "Yeah, I was listening to Mike Sanford, somebody that you may or may not be talking to pretty soon here." Mike Sanford and Mike had basically said that, well, you got to remember here, this team, if you're talking about a spring game, that defense has been playing against that offense, so they know the scheme generally the whole entire summer or the whole entire spring ball. So if even the fact they know them, they practice against them every single day, and they still get carved up, like what happened last year. Again, Ashton Jeanty, 5 touches, 150 yards or something like that. It's going to be a problem. Now, I was like, are we going to be able to move the ball? If Malachi's not throwing the ball, nobody's open. But again, that's what a testament. I think even Jaden Virgin was out of the game. Like, they were missing everybody, but it didn't matter because like they were just so well gelled and everything like that. I have a different third point here. I love your third point, though. Again, you mentioned one big run, one guy got away. Who is the 18-year-old kid out there? Actually, I think he might even be 17. Your boy, Sire Gaines. Talk to me about the young running back.
Sire Gaines is such an interesting story because he came here as an athlete. So he had a couple of different ways that he could go. I think he was listed as a running back and a wide receiver, so he could have gone into the wide receiver realm. He played safety, and I think he also could have had a role at linebacker. And he got taken out of that athlete role where they could have put him anywhere, and they decided to put him into one of the most stacked running back rooms in the Mountain West this season. I mean, you've got Ashton Jeanty, of course. You got Jean-Bray Dubar. You've got another running back from this recruiting class that looks highly touted, Dylan Riley, who will be coming in the fall. You have Tyler Crow. You have Dudley. But this was a pretty stacked, pretty thick wide running back room that didn't look like it had a lot of openings. And they still decided to take this guy and put him into that room. So you knew off the bat that there was something the coaches were saying that they wanted to see on the field. There was something from this guy that they thought he could make an immediate impact. And the last 2 spring games, there has been that 1 or 2 athletes that have popped, and it has shown what they're going to do on the field. That one of those 2 athletes that maybe they were a little under-touted, they weren't the number 1 guy, but they have done something that I've seen, and I've gone, okay, that is a harbinger of things to come. So 2022, you had Ashton Jeanty and Eric McAllister. Jeanty was pretty highly touted. McAllister really wasn't, but he had that one catch in the corner of the end zone that I think they called incomplete. But it was a crazy catch, like kind of a 1 foot down diving catch. And I thought, wow, okay, this is a guy that is going to be exciting. And of course, Ashton Jeanty looked good in that game. 2023, Maddox Madsen, he looked really good in last year's spring game. And he was completely overlooked because he's so short, because Taylor Green was the star. Nobody was looking for a quarterback battle. So I think he got kind of overlooked. And we saw what he did last year. Well, this year, the guy to keep an eye on, the guy who has popped, is Sire Gaines. Early enrollee, still a high school kid, basically, as far as your typical age group and size. But he early enrolled in Boise State. He finished up his stuff early, and he led the room offensively. He together for total offensive yards, all purpose. He had 63 yards. He had 63 yards total. He had 45 yards rushing and 18 yards receiving. As a brand new freshman running back, still learning the ropes, but you saw him out there. The moves that he was making in open space, they really reminded me a lot of Jeremy Avery. He's got a little bit of Jeremy Avery kind of open field catching ability. He was a real threat in the receiving game. He had these super quick one-off moves that he knew exactly when the defense was coming up on him. This is the guy. He's not going to, Ashton Jeanty is going to be your number 1 guy. And I think Jean-Bray Dubar is going to be your number 2. But I think it's going to be a real close rotation there between Jean-Bray and Sire Gaines. And I think you're going to see Sire Gaines working his way into a role and potentially competing for starting position next year.
Absolutely. And yeah, you mentioned there the fact people forget this here. Early on in the game, they were playing thud tempo. The tempo is that cheap thing where, somebody runs up and they touch you on the hip. Oh, yeah, I would have tackled you. Well, even with that, he broke off that big long run. And then later on in the game, when he caught that check down, he put some dude on skates with a move here. He is definitely a dynamic athlete. And again, my third item that I wanted to talk about was, again, so you think about the Mountain West Championship game where the wide receiver core was banged up, everybody's injured. Austin Bolt needs to be shot up before every game, whatever it is. Did the wide receiver core go from a weakness to kind of a strength? Again, that's my perspective here, but we're going to talk about that here with our next section. So the next section we're going to talk about here, and I gave him this, we're going to go through 7 position groups to give them our overall grades for these position groups. I have quarterback, running back, tight end, wide receiver as a group, O-line, D-line, linebackers, and DB. So we'll start with quarterback. Mr. Bronco Blademeyer, what is your grade for the Boise State quarterbacks after the spring game?
Great for quarterbacks after the spring game. I think that you saw one quarterback that was a super high grade, and then 3 other quarterbacks that were a little bit of a different grade.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're grading quarterbacks all together, you have to remember the cumulative grade. So if you're just grading Malachi Nelson for what we saw out there, I'm going to give him a solid A-. And some might be saying plus performance, but he had some great throws out there. He also had some decision points where, he's not perfect yet. He has some great ball placement. He's putting the ball in really good spots, but he doesn't have a 100% mesh with the wide receivers. He's still building that relationship with them. And there were a few times where he didn't throw the ball in the right place. There was a couple of times where he wasn't on an A+ performance. So he's still working a little bit with that game awareness and making the right decisions. But all that comes with experience. He's going to have a full fall camp to build up to that. So when you talk about Malachi Nelson, A-, solid A-. Everybody else, C+. And I think maybe being a little bit generous there. I thought that, towards the end of the game, the other quarterbacks made some nice plays or some nice throws out there. So I'm going to say overall a solid B performance from the quarterback room. The running backs, I would have loved to see more from Jean-Ray Dubar.
Me too.
We didn't see anybody breaking off any big runs. I think Dubar only had like 4 yards total. Jean-Ray 5 yards total. So he had gained 6 yards or 9 yards. He lost 4, so he had a total of 5 yards. I don't know if they were limiting him a little bit or if he just didn't pop in this game. So I didn't see a ton out of the running backs, but I really liked what I saw out of Sire Gaines. We're at 26 yards when you're still playing touch football. And if it was tackle football, he might have been able to break that last one and keep running. I mean, he was making a move down there at the end before they touched him. So I'm going to say B- overall from the running backs. Like, it wasn't terrible. There were some nice runs, but nobody broke off a big one. And that says a lot for the defense. Tight ends and wide receivers, B+. Very, very nice. Yep. Very, very nice overall. But there's still a little out of sync. There's still some things that they're needing to work on. That long pass, Prince Strawn. There are a couple other opportunities that they could have made more out of it. So solid B+ performance, but they're still working on maybe getting open. And it doesn't help that the defense knows the scheme and it knows the formation that you're about to run. But there were several plays there where the quarterback's being forced out of the pocket and he's on the move and he's looking for Austin Bolt. And the defense is just all of you. There's nowhere to go. So I think that they're still working a little bit on their chemistry and a little bit on their tightness there. But overall, great performance. Offensive line, really, really solid run blocking overall. Yeah. I mean, that run of Sire Gaines, that was down to run blocking. That was a perfectly blocked run. Really, really nice job with run blocking. Decent pass block. I think there was at least one pass that Nelson got off. I think it was the first one to Prince to Caples, where when you look at that on the replay, maybe the defender got to him just before, but they let it go. It was a big play and your momentum, you want to move on. So pass block is a little bit down, but I don't think they had everybody out there either for the offensive line. I may be wrong on that. It's kind of hard to tell watching from the tape, but
it's not that great of a zoom. I'm trying, friends.
Overall solid B+. Defensive line and linebackers, they did a decent job on run stop. Once the ball got past that first or second yard, they did a really good job of swarming and getting the carrier down. But you didn't see a ton of penetration throughout the game. They didn't see a ton of effective blitzes. They did get to them a couple of times, but not a ton. I would like to see more on that. A little bit of better job stopping the short passes from the running back. I thought every single time that they threw that ball, to Sire Gaines or they threw an out route to Genty, every single time they threw that little bubble screen, the running back was getting 6 or 7 yards on that. So I think they could have done a better job on that little short game and also of getting penetration. And then the defensive backs, it's really good positioning. It's just really good positioning against maybe one of the best quarterbacks in the Mountain West this year. I mean, with the potential to be that. I mean, with you have ball placement like that, there's really nothing you can do. So overall, I'm going to give them a B- because I thought they didn't really stop Nelson that much, but it's kind of hard to stop him. He's a great quarterback. So I thought overall secondary performed much better. There's still a little bit of work there to do, but they are definitely on an upward trend. There were a lot of holes in the coverage for like the short middle passes. There if they wanted to go on that out route. You had the JUCO transfer, Fritz Marshall. He had a lot of really nice catches where he was pretty decently open. So that middle passing route was open. But in sacrificing some of that middle game, they did not let anybody get wide open deep. Yes. That is a major improvement. So that's my overall grade. And then if I want to grade one last person, I'm going to grade Cutter. I'm going to grade offensive coordinator play calling for a spring game. You say a spring game, you're usually thinking a little bit of a vanilla play. Okay, they come out here, they throw a couple of light out routes and deep ball stuff, a couple of runs up the middle, a couple of zone. But they were running some complex stuff out there. We've already talked about the 50-yard or 30-yard touchdown to Prince, which again was a fake handoff to the right. Everybody's flowing right. Then he rolls left. He looks left. There's a wide receiver running a route to the left. And instead, or maybe it was a tight end run. I forget in my head exactly what the right looked like. But there were wide receivers or tight ends moving to the left. And then he comes back and throws a deep right corner pass. And then you had a wide receiver pass from Henry that he almost threw to the tight end. The tight end was like triple covered, so he thought better of it and came back. But you almost saw a trick play, a wide receiver pass in a spring game. And then there was another play towards the end where they had a play action bootleg right with a run pitch option. And then the 50-yard deep ball. This was a actual offense that was being called out there. And if this is just the not revealing any secrets part of the playbook, I cannot imagine what this Boise State offense is going to look like with the most experienced offensive coordinator in all of college football. There is not another offensive coordinator out there besides Chip Kelly, who has been a former NFL coordinator or NFL head coach and has the experience that Dirk Cutter has. What we saw in the spring game and what we're going to see on the field, if you take what you saw in the spring game and you magnify that and you complex it and you put it into this year's offense, with Malachi Nelson at a full throwing tilt, this is going to be one of the most dangerous offenses in the group of five this year.
So there you go, Bronco Blayfire. Confirmed, Boise State versus Ohio State in the national championship. All right, here we go.
100%.
No, anyways, all right. So let's continue on to our last section here. So we get a lot, again, there's only so much you can pull from it, but there's a lot of things that you don't know that you now no longer have questions on, but there still are some remaining questions from the spring game. What are some of your remaining questions on Boise State football remaining from the spring game?
All right, so I've got a few remaining questions here, and some of these we'll talk about tomorrow when Mike Sanford comes on my show and we're talking about the Boise State offense.
Check it out. It'll be on his channel. Check it out.
Yeah. Okay. The first question is going to be, who is QB1? That is not set in stone. I mean, everybody, they were already on the Malachi Nelson hype train before, and the spring game has just pushed that train into full steam down the track. But standing in front of that train, there is a railroad tie called Maddox Madsen, who could potentially derail that. He is not out of the competition. However, if Maddox Madsen wins this thing, it will show the quality of quarterback that he was. There were a lot of people that are out there saying, well, if Maddox Madsen wins, it means that Nelson didn't live up to his potential. We have seen what Nelson is capable of. If Maddox Madsen is able to win this job, it just means that Maddox Madsen was able to win this job. It's a true strength versus strength. Two of maybe the best quarterbacks in the Mountain West competing against each other for who takes a starting job at Boise State. So this is not over, but the battle just got a lot harder. It is going to be a lot harder. I really feel for Maddox not being able to compete in the spring ball. He wanted to. He was against doctor's orders, still out there in training, throwing the ball around, and coaches were yelling at him to slow it down, to calm it down. He feels the pressure. He knows what he's up against. He knows how good Nelson is, and he's a competitor. So he's going to battle. He's going to fight in fall camp. We will see what happens. It's the coaches learning the lesson. It's going to be a one quarterback system. There is no way we see a repeat of last year. Please. There's no way we see a repeat of last year. There will be one quarterback that comes out of fall camp, but it's not set in stone yet. So that's the number one question. But I think we started to get some answers because Nelson's looking really good. Second question I have is who will be the wide receiver one? We saw a lot of guys out there. You saw Latrell Caples with that incredible catch on the sideline. You saw, Marshall looks really, really good. The number one JUCO transfer in the nation. Chase Penry. I mean, that's a guy pretty much out of nowhere for most people. I mean, I've been really excited about him, but I think most people, he hasn't been on their radar. And he had the play of the game with that deep touchdown pass, and he was very involved. He had another pass that was an out route. He was targeted on another pass that was just batted down. And then he had that throw that was almost a throwback. For me, Chase Penry has a little bit of that Vinny Peretta vibe about him. Kind of that guy that's not your number one wide receiver. You're still probably going to different wide receivers as your number one options out there. But he's going to be having a role and a major role in this offense. Maybe a little bit more of that creative spark, maybe that third down guy that you go to. He's going to have a role in this offense. But then Prince Strawn, he's looking really good. And in fact, from what we heard coming out of spring camp, it seems like Nelson and Strawn maybe have the deepest chemistry of any of the wide receivers on this roster. And Nelson was definitely going at him. I mean, he threw that deep 50-yard ball. He threw another great in route I believe there was double coverage. There was a high safety and a corner coming across, and Strawn laid out and caught that ball. So there's a connection there. And then, Austin Bolt, he had a couple of close catches, and Campers was injured, the transfer from Indiana. So this is the most impressive Boise State wide receiver room I have ever seen. And we still don't know who's going to be wide receiver one coming out of this. So that's my second big one. Third is who will step up on the line with Hassanin. I don't think we really saw anybody kind of raising their head during this spring game. Somebody that you thought you look and you're like, hey, that's DeMarcus Lawrence 2.0. That's a Leighton Vander Esch type out there. Like, I didn't really see anybody on that Boise State D line / pushing the linebacker core that was really exploding like Ahmad Hassanin for that pressure. So that's still a question that needs to be answered. Can the corners provide consistency? We saw some nice plays out of them, but can they keep it going consistently, especially when they're reading against other players' playbooks? And that's not something we will find out until the first game of the season this year. And then the biggest one is, can Genty stay healthy? Can Genty stay healthy this season? Because he gets hurt in the spring game. This little cramp or something like that. It didn't look like it was major. Nobody panic. He's fine. But if Genty goes, that is a bedrock of your offense. So he had an injury last year. He had, Helani was the number one back. Boise State's kind of had a history of their number one backs kind of dealing with some injuries, and Helani was the number one back, and he consistently dealt with injuries. How hard is Boise State going to have to lean on him? After watching this spring game, they might not have to lean on him as hard. They have a passing game. It's going to be a factor. They have really good backups in Sire Gaines, and then what we saw Dubar do last year. Genty is the focal point. He's the hashtag Heisman of this team, but he doesn't necessarily have to be the entire team this year. I think what we saw from the spring game is going to really show that Genty doesn't necessarily have to be used as heavily as we maybe thought he was going to have to be this season. But that's still a question to be answered. And then I think the last question that we really didn't get to see, but is, how many passing yards is James Ferguson Reynolds going to have? That's really the biggest question I have, coming out of this is James Ferguson Reynolds. I really was hoping to see him as part of that quarterback competition. He can do it. So that obviously they weren't doing anything special teams, anything crazy. They weren't even like returning them. There's just a kickoff there. So James Ferguson Reynolds, I think this dude has 50 plus passing yards this year. That's the guy. I think he's going to be the number one passing punter in the country. You write that down.
Lock it up, baby. All right, that's perfect. No, I actually want to expand upon that a little bit too there. So you think about the wide receiver core. If it wasn't for availability, because the best ability is availability, if it wasn't for availability, they might be as talented as the running back room. But again, you think about that. You got Chris Marshall, who has his personal stuff. We hope that is in the rearview mirror. Okay. We hope that's in the rearview mirror. You have Austin Bolt, who apparently has been killing dudes in practice. Injuries. You talk about Latrell Caples. He's got injuries. You talk about Chase Penry had a little bit of injuries. Camper was injured in this game. He wasn't even there. The crazy thing is Prince Strawn might be the 5th or 6th most talented receiver, and he might be the only consistent thing that we have. It's crazy. But again, it shows the depth. It shows what they've done. The spring game was amazing. So everybody here, you're going to have linked to my boy Bronco's channel. You mentioned the interview he's going to have with Mike Sanford. He's going to preview the Boise State offense. We also have his views of the spring game down in the description. Mine will be as well. Jake, appreciate it, man, so much.
Thanks. Always a pleasure to come on. Everybody, Jake will be coming on my channel to preview the Boise State season when we go through our schedule preview video. That'll be the last video in the Boise State 2024 football preview series. So we've already had the defensive preview with J.L. Skinner and Hunter White. We've got the offensive preview coming up tomorrow with Mike Sanford, and then Kyle Brotzman is going to be coming on to preview the Boise State special teams. And I'm going to wrap it all up with the Jake Posey of Master Football coming on to preview the Boise State schedule and make our predictions for what we're hoping to see record-wise for Boise State. So make sure you stick around for all that. Make sure you guys like and subscribe to Jake's channel. Make sure you jump on over to his EA Sports gaming channel too.
MF Film Room, baby. The MF Film Room. It's got a lot of traction. I'll tell you that much.
It's exploding, man. I was looking at some of your popular videos there and the view counts. I mean, it's going up. So make sure you guys are subscribing and following Jake on that too, especially with the NCAA football game release coming out here soon when we're just going to lose all of our social lives and be completely dedicated to.
Don't talk to me in July. Don't talk to me in July. Yeah.
100%. But it was great coming on, Jake. As always, thanks for having me. And as always, go Big Blue!
Thank you so much for being here. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff. I really appreciate it. And so for me, guys, I'll see you guys later. I am out.